thank you for joining today, panelists. It's great to have you on the show. We're going to talk about how innovation, and it's a no-brainer. We see it every day out there. Obviously you guys are knee deep into it, but as people, as a consumer myself, as the audience, as both consumers and stakeholders, see the kind of innovations that companies like yours are bringing out into the market every day. This disruption that's happening in the digital ecosystem has truly happened over the last 5 to 7 years. I think it got kicked off in 2010 once Aadhaar came into being. Obviously, we do have some of our limitations in terms of the judicial pronouncements that have come. I'm sure you heard just now when we were wrapping up the previous session that there are security issues, data security issues that concern people, right? So I think what we want to talk today is about how each of you and your domain is poised to bring in innovation that makes life both easier for the consumers and safer for their transactions. I'd like to kick off by requesting each of the panelists, and I'm just going to go in the order that I can see you on the screen so that I'm not accused of any biases. Please introduce yourself to the audience, a little bit about what your organization does, and a brief overview on how you see overall innovation going in your domain. So we'll kick off with Anand. Anand, if you could take the stage for a few minutes and talk.
Thank you, Prasar, because what you see could be different than what we see, and hence we're hesitant. The era where in an environment where 750,000 villages in India, with hardly 1 lakh villages having more than 5,000 population, and yet 105,000 bank branches. This is quite a uneven distribution of banking. So one can happily say that bank hai par banking nahi. 115 million debit cards distributed but taken out of system in November 2019 because of chip and pin violation. Not violation, actually the deadline ticked in, and hence the people had cards but not being able to use it at ATM. Bank hai par banking nahi. It's not wrong to say. In an environment where ATMs are unviable and concentrated in clusters in urban areas in Delhi or Mumbai or industrial corridors, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 each. So the distribution has been quite uneven. That said, the endeavor PayNearby does is to bring the high end of technology to the bottom of the pyramid in a granularized, sachetized manner to universalize it through 500,000 retail touch points. We call them digital pradhan partners, kirana stores in deep rural areas. We are able to support, assist 150 million citizens. We don't call them customers yet because we are on national duty, we believe, and lockdown helped us bring out the best in us. Having said that, all we do is distribute sachet of trust with the government, with the banks. We are in a way extension counters for, if you may. And I relate to what Abhinav Trivedi said in the previous session about the corroborative buying behavior. People buy financial services from people they trust, not necessarily from the experts. So that's what we do for a living. Innovation we will talk through in the session. Over to my other colleagues on the panel.
Yeah, thanks, Anand. Saloni, if we could hear a bit from you.
Hi, thank you so much for having us over today and for inviting me to this. I've been at Paytm for about 5 years now, part of multiple teams, but especially the payment gateway team in 2 different stints. And currently I lead the B2B marketing function at Paytm. And I think I really would like to say that, +1 to what my panelists said previously, bank hai par banking nahi, and that is exactly what I think all of us are trying to solve. We are heartened to see merchants in small towns, in remote areas, use our service in a way which we had never imagined that they would use. And I think while there are millions of merchants who are using the service offline, there are very few using the service online today. And COVID really pushed everybody to start considering and seeing how they can use a service online. Last year, we've seen a host of categories that actually were never, they didn't have an affinity to using online payment services, but they have now started coming on board. A large category is just doctors and labs. Education institutions that were very hesitant are now actually coming forward quite a bit. So, Prasad, at Paytm, we have been at the forefront of bringing this, to the consumers and the merchants. We brought in innovations like the QR code back in the day, pre-demonetization actually, and demonetization just helped us accelerate the pace quite a bit. But more recently, I don't know if the viewers today have seen our social media channels, but we've launched a new campaign talking about our IoT devices, the Soundbox, which is really creating a wave in the market and enabling that little nuanced gap that was there that merchants and consumers were facing. So we're thrilled to be here, talk to you and share with all of you about how our journey is and talk about the innovations that we're working on. Thank you.
So thanks, Saloni. Shailesh, we'd love to hear from you now.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Prasad. Thanks for the opportunity. Firstly, and I just want to say that it's also really nice to be with partners. So nice to see you, Saloni. We work a lot with Paytm, and Anand, we work a lot with you as well. So I'm Shailesh Paul. I work at Visa. Visa's a global payments network. We're in the business of providing payment solutions across the world, linking up merchants, cardholders, and the rest of the ecosystem on the network. We're very much focused in India. Our focus is very much to grow the digital payments ecosystem. That's what we're focused on. My role within that is to support the seller enabler ecosystem. So that's all of the players that support merchants, be it acquirers, payment facilitators, payment aggregators, and of course the merchants themselves. We call that merchant sales and acquiring, which I head for India and South Asia. I've been with the company for a pretty long period of time, in 2 locations in Singapore for the largest stint, and based here in Mumbai. So great to be here, and thanks for this.
Sure, Shailesh, thanks. So, interesting perspective that Visa would have on on the payment gateways as they are evolving. I was actually going to say that I'm sure you work with Paytm and PayNearby and a host of all these guys. So it's been a little bit of a perspective shift in terms of how payments work, right? So while I like to hear from Anand and Saloni as well, and how they are seeing consumer spends and how they're seeing merchant behavior evolving. But what Visa and your competitors like Mastercard or Amex would have is a clear perspective on how the digital revolution has changed the way consumers spend and how merchants behave. So if you could give us some perspectives to kick off that, that would give us a great background to start the conversation.
Certainly, Prasar. So I guess the way to think about it is that India has been on the payments journey for a considerable period of time. We were not late into it. But for a long period of time, Indian customers and Indian merchants didn't adopt digital payments as much as many customers and many merchants across the world have. And if you think about it from the perspective of the seller, if you look at the number of digital acceptance points per 1 lakh population, for example, in India, we're still relatively behind. Although the number of payment credentials in the market is fantastic, right? So India has got over 900 million card credentials available. There's a large number of UPI credentials available. But the seller side of the ecosystem was relatively behind. With demonetization, what happened was that sort of quadrupled in a fairly fast period of time. And then now with the pandemic, as well as the higher access to technology, what we're seeing right now is a fantastic amount of revolution that's happening in terms of e-commerce. So e-commerce in India has finally come of age. Our estimate is that it'll grow. It's grown fantastically, and it'll grow another 3 to 4x in the next few years. So with all of that that's happening in terms of digital commerce, the question then comes, how are our customers going to get served? Who's going to make sure, if you had to use the analogy of digital commerce being highways, that you're on that highway, sometimes you're driving on that highway in the middle of the night. The question then is, how do those highways keep running efficiently? Who keeps them safe? Who makes sure that you actually get to your destination? And that's where a lot of the players in the digital ecosystem we've been collaborating. So there's a number of players in the ecosystem. There's the banks, the legacy players. There are the new technology players like Paytm, like others. Increasingly, fintech players like PayNearby are coming together. And of course, everyone else who's been playing that ecosystem, particularly the merchants. The the change that's been happening in the recent past is twofold. One is that consumers now understand that digital commerce is the best way to go. It offers them the convenience, the choice, the economics sometimes. And service providers have come together to make that, once you enable the customer experience, once you can convince customers that it's secure, and it actually is, that then forms the foundation. And that's now providing the growth that we're seeing in the recent past. So what we're now seeing is that we're set for growth. We've seen a fantastic amount of growth. We're not there yet. The next 3-4 years will be an amazing journey where we will keep on growing the business. Our focus is going to be on 2 aspects. One is to make sure that customers' experience keeps getting better. Today, there's a lot of friction in Indian commerce. Secondly, that each of the stakeholders has the opportunity to grow their business underpinned with the foundation of security. If we can keep on moving ahead on all 3, then I think we're doing our jobs.
Great, Shailesh. I think great perspective. I think it kind of helped us understand that that flow of how it's kind of been and how it looks like it's going to be going forward. Saloni, I'd like to come to you there and say that look, Paytm of course has become a highly recognized brand. Out on the streets wherever we go. Obviously a lot of competition building up. But even though it's let's say compared to a Visa, your the vintage would be recent, right? You would still have seen the evolution of behavioral changes for both merchants and consumers, right? Especially with the last 5 or 6 years, where the India stack and the whole fintech ecosystem has exploded. So can you give us a little bit of insight in terms of what Paytm has been seeing over the last few years and how do you see it evolving as we move forward?
Sure. So I think, Paytm today in the consumer's mind is a company that's associated with the Paytm consumer app and the wallet. And that's the primary branding that, and that's the primary recall that everybody has in their mind. But Paytm actually is much more than that. And the payment gateway that enables the Paytm consumer app, right? That same SDK is now available to every merchant in the country. You could be a small merchant launching your app, you could be launching your website, or you could just be somebody who wants a cash on delivery order using a payment link. But that same SDK is available to you literally at no cost to start with. And that evolution, that journey that we're seeing, because we're hearing from different consumers about different merchants about different things. Like Shailesh mentioned that e-commerce, saw its time right now, like we saw back at demonetization. But e-commerce needs very different solutions than what a taxi player needs. It needs very different solutions than what a food provider needs. And our payment stack enables all of those customizations very easily. Today, we're seeing, after COVID, that a lot of small, medium businesses, home-based businesses want to access and use this technology. They require safety and security, but they also need something where there is no tech integration. They need something which is a plug-and-play solution. So we have created our product we have broken down our product into multiple smaller features and products that are applicable to each of these nuanced use cases where people can just plug and play as per their requirement. And I think that is where the industry is also turning to and changing. The adoption will only grow when those solutions are available. Like Shailesh mentioned, that you're on the highway and you're at night, you need that protection and that safety and security. How do you provide that? Those are the things that keep us awake at night, right? How do we make it more secure for both merchants and for consumers? So that's where we are. And I think with the growing need and demand, we're creating a lot of these simple use cases. And I'll just illustrate a few to you. And Uber wants to check that you have the money before you start using their service, right? They block a certain amount, and then they allow you to sit in the car. But an education provider needs a very large ticket size to be transferred to them and needs a better reconciliation system, right? An e-commerce player wants something on their website, but also wants ease of use, that in case you have ordered cash on delivery and I don't want to pay that cash on delivery cost, can I send you a payment link? So I think the payment gateway and the payment systems are now getting broken down into very small, simple, nuanced products.
Great. Thanks for that insight, Saloni. Although I think what Uber needs to also do is that, clean up their statements, because, what happens is that now when I look at my Paytm statement every month, for 10 trips, I have 30 entries because of Uber. So interesting perspectives there. But yes, it's definitely made life easier, because before Paytm came on, Uber, you get stuck without an OTP, and I've been stuck in the rain without an OTP, not getting a cab. So I think great stuff there. Anand, coming to you, I think it's fascinating, because in terms of what you're doing is kind of a bridge between what was happening earlier and what's going to happen tomorrow, right? And I'm sure, given the kind of audience that you're dealing with, there are some interesting perspectives that you see, both in terms of the B2B players that you work with, your direct consumers, and then their end consumers, right? So what are those perspectives that you can talk to us about, which differentiate today from what was happening yesterday, and how do you see those trends emerging for the future?
Great. So I would say great compliments to Visa, Master, and to Paytm for being the harbingers of digitization in India and world over. If I briefly allude and say that taking banking to consumer is what Visa, Master brought much ahead of when neo banking or open banking was being spoken of. You will relate to it that sitting in a restaurant, my bank was in my pocket. Is that not open banking? Are they not fintech enough? So fantastic work, railroads laid by them, I would say, to Paytm karo, Goli mat do, or Paytm karo. It's a great way to build the nation. Of course, when rocket is launched, not the whole rocket leads and reaches the moon. There are burnouts and only the cockpit reaches the moon. That said, if you look at the segment that we cater to, we don't call them customers, we call them citizens, because it's a higher pedestal than dealing with a customer, I would say. Because as a national asset, we are on national duty, we would say, reaching out to the banking, non-banking financial services, digital services to the citizens. Having said that, we are a platform with open API for integration and a network for mass distribution. In 17,632 postal codes today, with 500,000 retail touchpoints, we dispense sachets of trust from various sectors. If I say I collect EMI from 32 NBFCs, where people want to pay, but the cash collection guys are not able to reach out to them, it's a great duty that we are at. If I tell that Baiju customers are able to come and deposit their EMI or payments at our outlet, or the Swiggy food delivery people are able to drop by their cash to my retailer, it's a win-win. We are able to optimally utilize that network, that footfall. If I say that at a fertilizer shop, I am able to sell football now, the retailing is entirely going to go through a paradigm shift, because Amazon is powering us at the back end. You can go to Bihar, Khagadia, a place where I hail from, and a fertilizer shop which we own in the family. The farmers then can get a football, or a daughter can buy a frock powered by Ammijan, if I may say in a light humor. That said, nothing was broken in payments. Cash to cash transactions were happening. Then came in the cards, and then went away the cards, the formless that happened, the convenience, the risk management, that the light in the night that Shailesh spoke about, the cardless, the postless, the formless methods that came in as innovation. So there are enough and more innovations happening in this space, and especially we say that we are taking the high end of technology in simplified, sachetized manner to universalize at the bottom of the pyramid. In January 1st week, we launched Soft POS. Now, on the format where my retailers don't need a POS terminal physically now. You tap and pay, and comes then the NCMC tokenized card along. So what have you, taking the fact that 8% of India remains digitized, they are digital savvy value seekers. I will not say greedy here. They are value seekers. Depending on who gives discount, they will shift loyalty. But then there is 92% India which wants the service and respects the service provider. They want them to survive, unlike burnout and then lose away the race. There is no point. And important to say that we, while bring high end of technology, simplify it and bring innovation to common man, it is equally responsible to do that in a profitable manner, be it a small iota of profit, because no social impact is possible without a commercial viability. And we do feel happy partnering with partners like Visa to bring the Soft POS, for example. We launched There was support. There are POS terminals that we are deploying. We have a partnership support, and then there are way forward, a lot of things that we are working on together.
Great, thanks, Anand. So I think you can't really blame the 8% so much, right? Because I think all the new age startups have brought so many deals and discounts onto the ground that people want to run from deal to deal. But I'm sure it's going to be heartening for the audience to understand that 92% of our consumers are focused on loyalty and good service and respect the service provider. So I think that's great. So I think Anand, just if I can stick with you for a moment. See, I hear great numbers from you in terms of the opportunity, in terms of the market penetration, right? But what are the next three big things that have to come into the market according to you, or what is it that are the next three big things that you're going to do? I'll give you a simple example. I did my exchange term abroad 20 years ago. As a part of my MBA, and I remember encountering a sub-service called FPOS. I'm sure the guys at Visa would be well aware of it, right? Where you could just swipe your card and get cash at a retailer, right? In India, we're still not there, right? Although in hybrid forms, we're doing that now, right? But maybe the last 5-6 years, because of the whole India stack and fintech revolution, we leapfrogged a little bit ahead of the world. But with the controversy, for example, around crypto, not directly something that I'm looking for a response on, but I'm just trying to use it as an example where a lot of people are saying that this may be a regressive move that the Indian government is taking or the regulator is taking, right? So how do we ensure, right, that the next three big things, or what are those next three big things that need to happen in India? And how do we ensure that they do take place and they don't get mired in any regressive decision making?
So mired or regressive things, I don't promise you. That is fait accompli for anything that grows big and there is a attention which is caught. But what I believe is that three things which will drive India is user experience, leading to interaction and engagement, and most important, not gratification but enrichment. And experience will take care of all the frauds possible. And I can assure you, we can sit on a workshop separately. If you are able to design the right experience, you can get rid of all the frauds. And the interaction and engagements will drive the right purpose of the users and the providers. So there is a congruence of what they want and what I want to provide. Like Saloni said, for the Paytm thing, that they do all varieties of the segment of customers. You have to do mapping with what does the user want, and then give them the right interaction and engagement. And if this leads to a long-term enrichment of either a path to financial well-being and a trusted network nearby, or in some form help build a credit score for getting loan down the line. All those things I would say is part of the enrichment. So those are the three things. I'm not getting into what technology, what payment mode, what service, whether a device or a soft POS or a card will help do that. But these are the three key things that I believe that PayNearby at least is working on.
Great. Thanks, Anand. So, I'd like to just take that same string over to you, Saloni. You were talking earlier about Soundbox and, initiatives around the IoT space. And I'm sure you're looking at a lot more because, as the consumer volume, as the transaction volume has increased, you've seen a great number of opportunities. So, again, just to put that question to you, what are the next three big things for Paytm, right, over the next few years, maybe the next decade, and how do we ensure that we stay upfront on that?
Right. So I think for us, safety and security is paramount. I think as financial transactions increase, both for merchants and consumers, for everybody in the ecosystem, and I think for the government as well. If you look at the RBI report more recently, they also talk more about safety and security. That is extremely critical because as volumes grow, we have very, very ingenuous minds, and we find ways to beat the system. There are people who are just waiting to break in and trump over a system. And I think Jamtara, it came out and it showed us how creative people can be. So for us, safety and security is number one. We want to make sure that consumers, merchants always feel that this is the safest place to transact. But apart from that, I think we will put in a lot of energy in building, like I said, the nuanced services that every industry needs. Because without those nuances, we're not going to adopt the system as rapidly as we would like to. And today, I think the government has made a great move. UPI, just taking the MDR off the table enabled a lot more merchants to come on board. But that only a government could have mandated. A private player like us couldn't have done. And the third thing, I think what we are really going to do is just focus on more value-added services. Value-added services is where there is more, interest for the merchant, especially because it's not just a plain vanilla service that you can collect a payment. There is much more behind it. And building those value-added services will ensure that we have the right hooks. And for each of those things, I think we partner, like Shailesh mentioned, with Visa. I think there are 2 or 3 different projects that are going on at any given point of time to see how we can, improve in each of these areas.
Great, thanks, Saloni. So, I think interesting example around Jamtara, right? Even today we keep hearing, I think day before yesterday we heard the Delhi CM's daughter being, defrauded of some 35,000 rupees using, some tricks on one of the payment gateways. So, I think people, when you mentioned that security and safety is your primary objective, I think it's heartening to hear. And, I think I'd like to then, go over to Shailesh and pose the same question to him, right? Again, I'll bring the same perspective that I brought on at the first question, right? As somebody, as an organization with a much greater vintage, right? How do you see the next 3 big things? Because you've seen paradigm shifts that have been, probably tsunami scale over the past few decades, right? So what do you see as those 3 big things coming up for us in the next decade?
Certainly, Prasar. I'd say three things will happen or need to happen in India. Firstly, and just as a quick sort of context to this, as the pandemic happened and the digital revolution happened, the one segment that has been disadvantaged is small merchants. They've been left behind because the big tech players have moved much faster. So with our 64 million odd small and medium enterprises, to me, one of the big steps forward for us as a digital payments ecosystem is to enable small merchants for digital commerce. It's a necessary big step forward for the economy. And that is happening through a set of partnerships. It's happening with a set of low-cost solutions that are enabling the merchants at that scale. And it was also happening by way of economics. So big steps like the government putting out the Payment Infrastructure Development Fund. That enables the ecosystem to move forward. So there's a bunch of things that are happening around that. A whole lot more needs to happen. The second big step forward, according to me, is to scale e-commerce. As I was saying earlier, today it's an $82-83 billion segment. It's going to be $200 billion before we know it. There are a lot of challenges with e-commerce as it is today, but largely they relate to scale. Today, sometimes some payment systems will fail. Today, there is too much friction in e-commerce. The speed of these transactions is not ideal. And of course, security remains the number one concern. So all of that has to move forward for us to enable the massive change that we're seeing in our economy as more and more transactions go online. That would be the second trend. And then the third is that and it's not so much an item or a change that happens one at a time, but it's an evolution, and that's around user experience and customer experience. That has to change when it comes to face-to-face commerce. So things like, for example, tap to pay that we're talking about, that Anand just mentioned on the enabler side, the same thing needs to happen on the consumer side. Lower friction payment systems, such as, for example, we have something called Visa SafeClick, where we step in and perform the authentication. Just making sure more and more such payment experiences get more streamlined, because when customers get a better customer experience, when they feel secure with it, then they will adopt. And that then sort of adds up toward what the government wants to do in terms of our digital enablement journey. If I could, there's actually 3 underpinning principles as well. Firstly, no compromise in security. That has to be something that everyone embraces. There can be no compromise. one incident has too many other implications. We can't have any of those compromises. The second is that we have to make this sustainable, and we have to make it sustainable for all of the players in the ecosystem, which means there have to be economics in the business, which means that there has to be innovation in these payment experiences. And then the third underpinning principle I would state is that we need to create more open platforms, open and scalable platforms where there is an openness to participate. Right, so we enable one such platform where more and more players are using that, but we have to allow more players to come in, because that's where we'll get the sustainability and that's where we'll get the innovation. So that would be, three big steps forward and three underpinning principles. Sorry, I took 3 plus 3. So
Great,
that's all right.
It helps us, it helps the audience, and I think we all get a deeper perspective. So it's all welcome. So Shailesh, I think the first question about the small businesses getting left behind, right? I think with payment gateways, one of the key things is that across the spectrum, you have touch points to businesses, small, big, and huge, right? You've seen how businesses have been able to evolve. You work with partners who can help businesses. So are there any specific goals? Are there any specific approaches towards enabling small and medium businesses to grow, right? So, for example, Anand mentioned that, a little lateral, but, a fertilizer shop being able to sell footballs because they get insights saying that, look, this is becoming hot now, and it doesn't really dilute your business, but you could earn a little more money, and then you could scale up. So both tactical and strategic advisory, is that something that payment gateways are doing, and what can they do better?
Yeah. So the payment gateway is a specific role in the ecosystem. So I'll come back to that. But 3 things need to happen over here, right? Firstly, the legacy system was that banks would go out and enable these merchants. Now, as we get to the smaller and the smaller merchants, sometimes it just doesn't make sense for a large bank to be able to deploy that last mile connectivity. So it's important for us to enable players that are interested in that ecosystem and are willing to operate at that scale. Sorry, I've lost you, Prasar, and I've got somebody else's picture coming up.
Hi, can you still see me, Shailesh?
You're back. There was somebody.
Yeah, so I think the speakers for the next session might be joining. One of the drawbacks of the wonderful technology that we have.
Yeah. I thought I lost you. There was a lady on, her picture was on. So I was saying that we have to enable the right set of partners. So in that, one of the banks are in, the big tech players like Paytm are in. Now it's important for us to get the fintechs enabled. So a lot of our work is around enabling of the fintechs, and Anand referred to an example. But we have a fintech outreach program. We had something called Visa Everywhere initiative last year. We're redesigning our fintech fast track platform. All of that is just circle around saying, how do we enable more fintechs to participate in this payments ecosystem? Because they bring a lot of value, not just to the payments players, but also to the end use users, the merchants and the consumers. So that's one aspect of it. The second is we have to keep on making technology more accessible and lower cost. So tap to phone is one example that Anand talked about. That means you can use your phone to become a payment device. It eliminates the need for a POS. That's a fantastic step forward. We're trying to do the same thing as it relates to more types of QRs being able to operate interoperably. Not just one type of QR. We should be able to link all of those together. It ties in with what we're calling a network of network strategies, which is how do we work with the Paytm? How do we work with the PhonePe? How do we work with an ecosystem which is distinct and solves some specific problem, and can we link them up to the rest of the digital payments ecosystem? And lastly, it is around economics. So a lot of our work is around making it more affordable, but keep some economics in the game, because if you don't have economics, then no one has an incentive for security or for innovation. So keep the economics there, but make sure that the economics are fit for purpose, as well as reduce the cost, as well as make it more viable in terms of capital expenditure. And there we've been fortunate to be part of the discussion with RBI in terms of rolling out the IDF. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about as it relates to enhancing the ecosystem.
Great. So I think, Shailesh, I'll pull from that same theme and go over to Saloni. Saloni, I think, in terms of where you are, right, you have now been able to touch a lot of small, medium businesses, right? And you do get a lot of data and analytics in terms of what kind of products they're selling, what is the kind of revenues that they're able to earn, right? Which also gives you a unique opportunity to be able to run business intelligence and be able to give them insights. Is there a specific program that you run around it? How do you think that would help these businesses, and what are the goals that you seek to achieve out of such a program?
So, we have a bunch of initiatives that run because a merchant or a business, small or big, needs multiple things at the same time. So if you look at it, what we're doing is business.paytm.com is the website where businesses can go and find out more about this. But we have 4 large buckets. The first bucket is how do you collect money, and this is all in one payments. You may want to collect using offline, online, links. There are multiple products. So how do you collect money from your clients? The second is how do you disperse money to your vendors, to your employees? So we have solutions and systems for that. The third is what do you need for your own business? Do you need a bank account? Do you need employee salary accounts? Do you need loans? Because like you said, we have all of that data. We can enable loans and extend loans to you at a fairly quick pace. And we have an entire lending team that is working on that currently. And the fourth bucket that we enable merchants with is distribution. So digital distribution is very critical. And I think that is a subject that we are very, very passionate about. So we have 2 programs. One is the Paytm Mini Apps program and the other is Paytm Ads. And both of those can be used for businesses to reach out to more consumers and to access and set up their own distribution and garner more customers for themselves. So with these 4 large buckets, and these are multiple teams within Paytm, but there is a certain focus, you can actually take anything that you want for your business from business.paytm.com. And now we are focused more on making sure that we move merchants from one to the other as their needs and their demands grow. And I'll give you a simple example. With COVID, there was a young merchant. He had 5 shops in Pune selling stationery. 5 shops completely shut down, business coming to a halt. Quickly came to us and said, enable a payment gateway. Then came back and said, can you give me an EDC after 4-5 months when the shop started opening again? Then came back and said, hey, can you give me a loan? Right? So you don't know at which part of the journey what the merchant wants, but there is a systematic way that we do our outreach and ensure that all of this is available to them.
Great, thanks, Saloni. So I think taking the same thing to Anand, right? The way you are building your business is almost a franchisee model.